Superior pond, superior care. Your backyard retreat beyond compare. Minnesota's finest at your call. Your pond stays perfect all year long.
Welcome to this deep dive. I want you to picture something with me for a second. Just imagine you are standing in your backyard.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and the landscaping is just immaculate, right? And right in the center of it all sits this gorgeous, three-tiered, classic concrete fountain.
Like something out of a magazine.
Exactly, the kind of grand architectural centerpiece you would see in like a European courtyard. It's symmetrical, it's timeless, and it is supposed to be the relaxing focal point of your whole property.
It's supposed to be being the key word there.
Right. Now, I want you to imagine that this massive, beautiful piece of cast stone has been sitting completely bone dry and dead silent for 3 entire years.
Oh, man.
And just to add, a layer of absolute financial horror to that image, imagine that over the span of 4 years, you have spent nearly $80,000 trying to make it hold water.
It is just a staggering amount of capital to pour into something that fundamentally, it's just supposed to sit there and move water from the top to the bottom.
80 grand. And before the homeowners finally threw in the towel and just left it shut off, that single fountain defeated 5 different landscaping, plumbing, and irrigation companies.
5 of them. That is wild.
It's a true story, and it's actually the central case study in the source material we are looking at today from the water feature specialists over at Superior Ponds. So, okay, let's unpack this, because this deep dive isn't really just about landscaping or backyard aesthetics.
No, it goes way deeper than that.
It really does. It is a story about the inevitable clash between stubborn classical aesthetics, the actual laws of physics, and geography. We are exploring why certain beautiful things become, well, absolute nightmares when you take them out of their native context.
Yeah, we are looking at this really fascinating collision of human desire and environmental reality. When we decide we want a specific aesthetic badly enough, we often just, choose to ignore the underlying mechanics of the environment we were trying to force it into.
Which is such a human thing to do. Like, I have to ask you, the listener, have you ever stubbornly tried to make something work just because you loved how it looked, even when the universe and, your bank account was actively telling you no?
Most of us have been there.
Right, because that is exactly what happened with this fountain. And to understand how a decorative water feature racks up the price tag of a literal luxury car, we have to look literally from the ground up.
Yeah, starting with the dirt.
Exactly. We need to examine this battle between rigid cast concrete and the earth beneath it.
Because the very material these fountains are made of is, it's their first critical vulnerability. We were talking about cast concrete, stone composites, sometimes even solid marble.
So they are incredibly heavy.
Oh, hugely heavy. Individual pieces of these tiered fountains don't just weigh 20 or 30 pounds. They can weigh hundreds of pounds each. You usually need heavy machinery or like a specialized crew of technicians just to physically hoist the bowls and bases into place.
They are completely monolithic.
And because they are monolithic, once they are stacked, leveled, and sealed together with masonry adhesive, they are entirely inflexible.
They don't give at all.
Not an inch. They cannot flex, they cannot bend, and they definitely cannot adapt to movement, which, is a fatal flaw when the ground they are sitting on is constantly shifting beneath them.
Right, and this case study specifically takes place in Minnesota, which introduces a very specific geological problem.
Yeah, frost. According to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the frost depths in many parts of the state regularly exceeds 4 feet.
Wow, 4 feet down.
Yeah, so in the dead of winter, the cold penetrates the soil up to 48 inches down. Any moisture in that soil freezes, and as we know, when water turns to ice, it expands.
Right.
This creates a phenomenon known as frost heave. Capillary action actually draws more water up into the freezing zone, creating these thick lenses of ice underground, and they push the soil upward with literally thousands of pounds of force per square foot.
That is insane.
And then in the spring, it thaws and settles right back down.
Wait, okay, hold on. Isn't that exactly why contractors pour those solid concrete pads? I mean, if the soil is doing all of that heaving and settling, wouldn't putting a massive, heavily engineered concrete slab underneath the fountain fix the shifting issue?
That is a very common misconception. But concrete pads actually make the leveling problem worse when frost is involved.
Really? How?
Because you cannot outmuscle the earth freezing. If we connect this to the bigger picture, pouring a concrete pad doesn't stop the frost heave. It just makes it act like a massive, rigid seesaw.
Oh, I see.
So when the expanding ice under one side of that pad heaves up even a fraction of an inch, the entire rigid block tilts.
Ah, so the pad doesn't bend, meaning it just translates all that underground pressure into a sharp angle.
Plus, think about something like a standard concrete driveway. That slight seasonal tilt might not even be visible to the eye. Driveways also have control joints, those lines intentionally cut into the surface.
Right, to guide the cracks.
Exactly. So that when the pressure builds, the concrete cracks exactly where you want it to. But a fountain basin doesn't have control joints. If it cracks anywhere at all, it leaks.
Which is a disaster.
And even if the bowl itself doesn't crack, that microscopic tilt from the pad moving is magnified exponentially as water cascades down multiple tiers.
Because it's so tall.
Right. If a tall, three-tiered fountain is off level by just 1/8 of an inch at the base, by the time you get to the top tier, the geometry has shifted drastically.
Yeah.
The water isn't flowing evenly over the edges anymore. It's pouring heavily off one side and is completely dry on the other.
Which ruins the entire visual effect. You basically paid for the Bellagio and you get like a leaky faucet dripping down one side of a rock.
Pretty much.
And the case study detailed taking that $80,000 fountain apart 4 separate times, just disassembling and reassembling hundreds of pounds of wet concrete over and over again to chase these seasonal shifts.
Adding shims, trying to fix the level, constantly replacing the seals.
Yeah, because the system isn't modular. Every single adjustment requires breaking the fountain down to its component parts.
They are designed to be set up once on perfectly stable ground and never touched again. But northern soil simply will not let them sit still.
Okay, but even if you lived in a climate where the ground never froze, like Florida or something, you could still end up with an $80,000 puddle in your yard.
Oh, absolutely.
And that comes down to a fatal flaw in the actual blueprint of the bowl itself. So it's not just the ground moving. The manufactured design inherently sets them up for leaks.
Yeah. The fundamental engineering of the bottom basin is deeply flawed for a closed-loop system.
I was reading this part of the source material, and I tell you, I was trying to wrap my head around it. Imagine trying to eat a bowl of soup, right?
Okay.
But there's a hole drilled right in the dead center of the bottom of the bowl. And to keep the soup in, you have to plug that hole with a rubber stopper.
Sounds messy.
Right. The entire weight of the liquid is constantly pressing down, aided by gravity, trying to force that stopper out. And just to make it even worse, imagine you set that soup bowl on top of a vibrating table.
That's a perfect analogy.
If someone handed you that bowl, you would say the design was totally absurd. But that is exactly how the plumbing in these architectural fountains works.
Nearly all of these tiered architectural fountains route their plumbing pipes and their electrical cords directly through the center base of the primary fountain bowl.
Which is literally the lowest point of the entire structure, meaning it is the exact spot with the highest possible water pressure pushing down on the seal.
And it's also where the pump vibration is most concentrated. The constant microvibrations from the water pump slowly degrade whatever silicone or rubber sealant you use around that bottom penetration.
Well, it's just doomed to fail.
It really is. The team at Superior Ponds actually uses a rogue aftermarket solution for this. Because they are accustomed to building modern, flexible ponds, they adapt the sides of these concrete fountains to accept what are called bulkhead-style fittings.
So how does that actually work mechanically? I'm trying to picture it.
So a bulkhead fitting is essentially a heavy-duty mechanism used to pass a pipe through a wall without leaking. You drill a hole, insert the fitting, and then tighten 2 large flanges on either side of the wall.
Okay, that makes sense.
As you tighten them, they forcefully compress a thick rubber gasket against the concrete, creating a really tight, watertight seal. Superior Ponds will add an extension to place this entire penetration hole up near the top of the bowl, entirely above the resting water line.
Oh, so they're essentially just bypassing the bottom entirely to sidestep the water pressure. The water never even rests against the seal.
Exactly. It nullifies the design flaw. Gravity and water pressure are no longer actively trying to push through the penetration hole 24/7.
Okay, so then why do owners resist these modifications if it permanently fixes the leak? Because the homeowners in the case study fought the contractors on this for years, demanding they use the factory hole at the bottom.
Well, we run into the ultimate catch-22 in the fountain industry here.
There's always a catch.
Always. To modify the fountain with a bulkhead fitting so that it actually works and doesn't leak well, it usually voids the manufacturer's warranty.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
Nope. The manufacturers don't want amateur installers drilling holes into cast stone and potentially cracking the bowl, so they basically force you to use their precast hole at the bottom.
So you're totally forced into a corner. You have to choose between keeping a warranty on a broken, leaking system or intentionally voiding your warranty to build a system that actually holds water.
Exactly. And when a homeowner drops several $1,000s on a piece of cast architecture, they logically want to keep the warranty intact. So they force the installation crew to assemble it using the manufacturer's flawed bottom hole design.
And then the heavy water pressure and pump vibration eventually cause the seal to fail.
Yep. The water leaks out, the pump burns up because it runs dry, and the cycle of suffering just begins all over again.
Man, that is brutal.
Ah.
All right, let's assume you somehow get the plumbing perfectly sealed and the ground miraculously doesn't heave.
A best-case scenario.
Right. We still have to talk about the water itself, the biological reality of these features, because there is a massive missing element in classic tiered fountains, and that is filtration. There is zero biological or mechanical filtration built into the blueprint.
Zero. They're ultimately just decorative, stagnant bowls of water.
And the source material gets fairly graphic about what that actually means in a backyard setting. Think about the environmental load on an open bowl of water. You have wind-blown dust, seasonal pollen, falling autumn leaves.
Bird droppings. Lots of bird droppings.
Exactly. A significant amount of bird droppings. All of that organic matter falls into the bowl and just sits there, baking in the summer sun.
It creates a highly toxic soup very quickly. I mean, in a modern ecosystem pond or a contemporary water feature, the water is constantly circulating through a mechanical skimmer and then through biological media.
Like gravel or something.
Usually a specialized gravel bed or these high surface area filtration mats. That media acts like a high-rise apartment building for beneficial bacteria. The microscopic bacteria colonize that massive surface area and literally eat the excess nutrients and organic waste right out of the water.
Oh, wow. So it balances itself.
Right. It becomes a living, breathing ecosystem that actively balances itself.
But a classic tiered fountain completely skips the biological stage.
Entirely. Which traps the owner in a brutal cycle of heavy maintenance. Without that bacterial colony processing the waste, the water quality relies entirely on constant human intervention.
Which means scrubbing.
Scrubbing and chemicals. Owners are forced to use aggressive chemical treatments like algicides and heavy chlorine just to keep the water visually clear. And because the organic matter is still physically in the bowl, it requires manual scrubbing, draining, and vacuuming every single month.
You are essentially volunteering to chemically treat and scrub a giant, heavy outdoor bird bath every 4 weeks.
That's exactly what it is.
This brings up the most pressing question, I think. If they cracked because of the frost, if they leak from the body because of a terrible design flaw, and if they turn into stagnant, algae-filled bird baths because they lack biological filtration, why on earth were they designed this way to begin with?
To understand that, the key is to look at their geographical history. These classical fountains originated in Italy and the wider Mediterranean.
Right, the classic Roman fountain.
Exactly.
Yes.
What's fascinating here is the environment they were originally engineered for is fundamentally different in every possible metric. The Mediterranean has temperate weather, minimal freeze-thaw cycles, and incredibly stable soils.
Okay, so the ground isn't moving.
Right. But the most crucial difference is how the water actually moved. In historic European installations, these fountains weren't sealed, stagnant, recirculating vessels.
Wait, they didn't pump the same water in a loop?
No, not at all. They were endpoints of a much larger, gravity-fed hydrological system. Ancient systems like the Aqua Vergine in Rome brought continuous flowing water from natural springs miles away.
Oh, I see.
Fresh water was continuously pouring into the stone basins and freely flowing out into municipal drains. They didn't need biological filtration because the water never sat still long enough to stagnate or grow algae.
It just kept refreshing itself.
Exactly. And they certainly didn't need watertight rubber seals at the bottom of the bowl because they weren't closed loops. The water wasn't being held. It was just passing through.
Okay, but we import architecture from all over the world, though. We build homes with Mediterranean clay tiles. We use Roman columns on courthouses and banks. Why does a Roman column survive perfectly fine in a northern climate, but a Roman fountain becomes a complete disaster?
Because a column is a static structure. Its only job is to stand there and displace weight downward. But a fountain is an active water system. It is constantly interacting with the environment, fighting soggy groundwater, and, most importantly, fighting the physics of freezing ice.
And the source text highlighted the porosity of concrete as a major factor here, didn't it?
Yeah, that's huge. Cast stone and concrete appear completely solid to the naked eye, but under a microscope, they're essentially dense sponges. They are highly porous.
So water just soaks in.
Right, water seeps right into the microscopic surface voids of the material. So when you take a material designed for a warm Italian spring, soak it in water, and then plunge the ambient temperature below zero, that water trapped inside the concrete freezes.
And as we established earlier with the frost heave, water expands by about 9% when it turns to ice.
And that 9% expansion creates immense hydraulic pressure from the inside out.
Yeah.
That pressure easily exceeds the tensile strength of the concrete,
So it just blows it apart.
basically. The University of Minnesota Extension extensively documents how trapped moisture accelerates concrete deterioration in freeze-thaw cycles. The ice acts like millions of microscopic wedges. If water is left inside the bowls of these classical fountains over the winter, the surface will inevitably begin to flake, crack, and crumble,
Really? How fast?
often by the very second winter. What works beautifully as an open-loop system in Rome simply self-destructs as a closed-loop system in Minneapolis.
Man, so because these fountains are fighting their environment on every single level, like physics, biology, and geography, the financial and labor realities of keeping them functioning are immense.
Oh, yeah. The initial purchase price is often a massive financial trap.
I noticed that in the source. You can actually purchase a small, off-brand, tiered setup at a garden center for just a few $100s, or maybe a couple of thousand for a larger one.
Right, which sounds like a steal.
Yeah, it sounds totally reasonable to a homeowner looking for a major landscaping feature. So what does this all mean? Is this entire deep dive just an excuse for contractors to upsell clients to a more expensive, modern pond system?
It is very easy to look at the estimates and assume exactly that, but the reality on the ground is the exact opposite. Contractors who specialize in water features actively despise working on classical concrete fountains.
Really? Why, if they can charge a premium for the labor?
Because professional contractors hate doing things twice. And with these inflexible fountains, you're almost always doing things twice. The cost discrepancy really comes down to friction between the construction trades.
What do you mean by friction?
Well, a modern, all-inclusive ecosystem fountain might cost around $8,000 completely installed. But to install a classical concrete fountain, even if you bought the fountain itself on clearance, might start at $12,000 just in labor and setup.
Wait, break down that labor cost for me. Why is it so astronomical just to put rocks in the ground?
Because a classical fountain sits at an incredibly awkward intersection of different trades, and they all fundamentally clash.
Okay, like who?
To install one correctly, you need a mason to pour and cure the concrete base. You need a plumber who understands water pressure to run the rigid pipes. You need an electrician to wire the pumps. And you need a landscaper.
So you have 4 different specialties trying to coordinate on one heavy, inflexible rock.
Exactly. Now imagine the plumber lays the rigid PVC pipe, and the mason pours an 800-pound concrete basin over it to seal it. If the electrician later realizes the conduit isn't wide enough, or if the plumber's seal has a micro leak, the mason literally has to jackhammer his own work to give them access.
Oh my gosh, what a nightmare.
It requires heavy lifting equipment, specialty sealants that need extended cure times, and strict protection from rain while it cures. It is a highly fragile, slow, and frustrating process. The contractors aren't trying to overcharge. They are pricing in the inevitable headache.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if a homeowner has a hard deadline, like a backyard wedding, contractors often refuse the job entirely. Because right when you think it's finished, a rigid pipe snaps from soil settling, and you have to drain it and start all over.
Wow. You know, the source material emphasizes that the goal of adding a water feature shouldn't be to prove how stubbornly you can fight nature. The goal should be the peace and relaxation it brings to your space. And the alternative that Superior Ponds advocates for are modern fountain systems with hidden underground reservoirs.
Right, systems designed specifically for the climate they are actually installed in. Modern systems use flexible PVC plumbing that can seamlessly bend and adapt when the soil shifts or frost heave occurs, rather than just snapping.
Which solves the rigidity problem.
Exactly. They use hidden basins that capture the water below the frost line, and they incorporate proper biological filtration. They move with the earth instead of constantly fighting it.
It is the difference between working alongside nature and declaring an incredibly expensive war on it. So, just to recap what we've unpacked today, tiered classical fountains are undeniably gorgeous pieces of art. But installing them in a northern freezing climate is a literal war against physics, microscopic frost expansion, and historical context.
A war you usually lose.
Yeah. The beauty of a water feature should be about the tranquility it brings to your backyard, not an $80,000 maintenance nightmare that sits dead and silent for 3 years because a rigid pipe snapped under a concrete slab.
It serves as a really powerful lesson in understanding the native context of the things we try to force into our lives. And I won't leave you with the final concept to mull over, building on what we've explored today.
Oh, I like this.
We just spent this time dissecting how importing a Mediterranean open-loop water feature into a freezing closed-loop climate creates a massive financial and emotional drain. So take a look around your own life, your home, or even your workplace. What other beautiful or classic systems, whether that is a piece of legacy software, a family tradition, a vintage car, or an outdated way of doing business, are you constantly spending your energy trying to maintain simply because they were engineered for an entirely different environment or era than the one you are actually living in right now?
Are you pouring your energy and your money into a system that was built for Rome when you're actually living in Minneapolis? Think about that soup bowl with the rubber stopper in the bottom. Stop constantly trying to plug the hole, fighting gravity and pressure, and, maybe just get a better bowl.
Superior pond, superior care, your backyard retreat beyond compare. Minnesota's finest at your call. Your pond stays perfect all year long.